Most people spend their entire lives being financially harmless. They earn, they spend, they wait for permission from a boss, a bank, an economy, a system, and they call this stability. They never realize that this so-called stability is really just a slow bleeding of years, opportunity, and power. Sun Tzu never taught his students to be harmless. He taught them to become dangerous, not through violence, but through mastery of position. A dangerous man, in Sun Tzu's world, was not the one who screamed the loudest or fought the most battles. He was the one no enemy dared underestimate, because his strength, his timing, and his intentions were always hidden until the exact moment they mattered. Financially, almost no one alive today is dangerous. They are predictable. Employers know exactly how much pressure it takes to keep them compliant. Banks know exactly how much debt keeps them working forever. This is not an accident, it's a design. The financially harmless are easy to manage, easy to sell to, easy to keep in place. But there is a smaller group who understand something different. They understand that wealth is not simply about income. It's about becoming an entity that cannot be pushed around, someone whose resources, patience, and strategic thinking make them unpredictable to the systems built to control them. Sun Tzu warned that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without ever fighting him directly. In wealth, this principle is almost never taught. Instead, people are taught to fight loud, visible battles, chasing raises, chasing promotions, chasing lifestyle upgrades that broadcast their ambition to everyone around them. And in doing so, they lose the one advantage that separates the powerful from the powerless, the element of surprise. By the time most people realize they've spent 15 years fighting battles they were never equipped to win, the years are already gone. The wealthy rarely announce their moves. They study, they wait, they position, and then they strike with a force no one saw coming. This video is not about earning more money. It's about becoming someone money cannot afford to ignore, someone the system can no longer predict, control, or quietly drain. And it begins with a truth almost nobody wants to hear about: why they've stayed financially harmless their entire life. Sun Tzu wrote that all warfare is based on deception: appear weak when you are strong, appear strong when you are weak. Nowhere is this principle more violated than in how ordinary people handle money. The moment someone gets a raise, buys a new car, or starts a side business, they announce it. To friends, to family, to coworkers. They believe visibility equals success. Sun Tzu would call this a fatal exposure of position. Every piece of financial information you reveal becomes a weapon in someone else's hand. The coworker who learns your salary uses it to judge whether you deserve your seat. The relative who learns you're doing well suddenly remembers a loan they never mentioned before. The employer who senses your hunger for more responsibility quietly decides how far they can stretch you before you'd ever consider leaving. None of this happens through malice alone, it happens because visible ambition invites calculation from everyone around it. Consider the story of a small business owner who spent years secretly building a second income stream through rental property, saying nothing to her employer or her extended family. While her co-workers loudly negotiated raises and lost goodwill in the process, she quietly accumulated leverage. When she finally left her job, no one saw it coming, and no one could stop it, because no one knew it was happening. Her silence had already won the battle before anyone else knew a war existed. This is where most people get trapped without realizing it. They confuse discretion with dishonesty, believing that hiding their progress is somehow deceptive. But Sun Tzu never taught deception for cruelty, he taught it for protection. The financially dangerous understand a simple law: information given away for free becomes a tool used against you. But invisibility alone isn't enough. A general who hides his strength but never prepares his army still loses the war the moment it begins. Sun Tzu's next principle explains why timing, not just silence, is what determines whether an opportunity turns into fortune or into another year lost. Sun Tzu believed that victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. Applied to wealth, this principle exposes one of the most painful truths about why so many ambitious people stay stuck. They wait for the opportunity to appear before preparing for it. By the time the opportunity actually arrives, they scramble, and scrambling almost always loses to preparation. Think about the layoffs that swept through entire industries during economic downturns. 2 employees, equally talented, equally overworked. One spent years quietly building savings, learning a second skill, and maintaining a small freelance client base on the side. The other spent every raise on lifestyle upgrades, assuming the paycheck would always be there. When the downturn hit, one walked into freelance work seamlessly. The other panicked, applying to hundreds of jobs, competing against thousands of equally desperate people. Neither saw the crisis coming. Only one had already won the war before it started. This is not luck. This is preparation disguised as luck. The wealthy don't predict every crisis, they simply build positions strong enough to survive most of them. Rockefeller famously kept significant cash reserves during periods when others were fully leveraged, allowing him to acquire distressed assets at pennies on the dollar when panic hit the market. He didn't win because he was smarter in the moment of crisis. He won because he had already prepared for a crisis nobody else believed was coming. Most people never notice what happens next in their own lives, that inaction during calm periods becomes the direct cause of desperation during turbulent ones. The relative safety of everything is fine right now lulls people into skipping the very preparation that would protect them later. But preparation alone still isn't the full picture. Even a well-prepared army can lose if it fights on the wrong ground. Sun Tzu's next lesson reveals why some people build wealth effortlessly while others work twice as hard on terrain that was already working against them from the start. Sun Tzu insisted that the general who understands the terrain has already gained a decisive advantage before a single arrow is fired. In wealth, terrain means the economic and industrial ground beneath your feet, and almost nobody studies it before choosing where to plant their effort. Picture 2 skilled workers in the early 2000s. One spent a decade mastering a trade tied to an industry already being hollowed out by outsourcing and automation. The other, with comparable talent, moved early into a rising field connected to software and digital infrastructure. Both worked hard. Both were disciplined. But one was fighting uphill on collapsing ground, while the other was climbing terrain that was actively rising beneath him. Effort was never the deciding factor. Position was. This is the trap that swallows even talented, hard-working people. They assume that working harder can overcome bad terrain. It rarely can. A farmer planting seeds on a flood plain will lose to a farmer planting on higher ground, no matter how much more skillfully he tends his crop. The wealthy study where capital, technology, and demand are flowing before they commit their time, because time spent on dying terrain, no matter how hard-earned, produces diminishing returns. Warren Buffett has spoken about the importance of understanding the underlying economics of an industry before ever considering the individual company within it. He avoided industries with structurally declining economics, even when specific companies inside them looked cheap, because no amount of individual skill fixes a sinking foundation. This is where the wealthy think differently. They don't ask, how do I work harder here? They ask, am I even standing on ground worth fighting for? Most people never ask this question until it's too late, until the terrain has already shifted beneath them without warning. But reading terrain is only half the strategy. Even on the right ground, timing determines whether you capture the reward or watch someone else claim it first. Sun Tzu's next principle reveals the weapon almost nobody has the discipline to use. Sun Tzu taught that the skilled strategist moves only when the moment offers certain advantage, and waits patiently when it does not. Waiting, to most people, feels like weakness, like time being wasted. To the strategist, waiting is the sharpest weapon in the entire arsenal, because it allows advantage to accumulate quietly while others burn their energy chasing premature wins. Consider 2 investors who each received a modest inheritance in their 20s. One immediately chased fast returns, speculative trades, trendy business ventures, quick flips, desperate to see results within months. The other placed the money into steady, unglamorous investments and refused to touch it for over a decade. The first investor experienced brief moments of excitement followed by repeated losses, forced to start over more than once. The second investor, doing nothing dramatic at all, watched compounding quietly multiply the original sum many times over. Patience, not activity, created the outcome. Charlie Munger often pointed out that the big money is not in the buying and the selling, but in the waiting. This idea unsettles people conditioned to believe that constant motion equals progress. But Sun Tzu never equated motion with strategy. He equated correct timing with victory. A general who attacks too early exhausts his army for nothing. A general who attacks too late finds the advantage already gone. The dangerous few learn to sit still with discipline while the impatient many burn themselves out chasing shortcuts. This is where almost everyone gets trapped, mistaking urgency for opportunity. The desire to see quick results pushes people into decisions that erase years of otherwise sound positioning. The truly dangerous understand that time itself is a resource being spent whether they act or not, and the wisest use of it is often simply enduring. But patience without perception is blind. Knowing when to wait means nothing if you cannot control how others perceive you while you do it. Sun Tzu's next principle reveals why perception itself becomes a form of leverage. Sun Tzu declared that all warfare is based on deception, not lies for their own sake, but the careful shaping of what an opponent believes to be true. In wealth and career, this becomes the art of controlling perception. Because whether someone sees you as replaceable or irreplaceable often matters more than your actual skill level in the moment negotiations happen. Two employees can have nearly identical output, yet receive drastically different treatment. One is seen as reliable, steady, always available, and precisely because of that reliability, they are taken for granted, never feared as a flight risk, never prioritized for advancement. The other cultivates scarcity. They are excellent, but selectively available. They mention, without desperation, that other opportunities exist. Employers cannot help but calculate the cost of losing them. This isn't manipulation for its own sake, it's the deliberate management of position, exactly as Sun Tzu described positioning an army to appear stronger than an opponent assumed. A well-known example is how top negotiators approach salary discussions. Those who appear anxious for the raise routinely receive smaller ones. Those who appear calm, prepared, and mildly indifferent to the outcome, because they've built other options, are offered more, faster, almost every time. The company isn't rewarding better work. It's reacting to perceived scarcity. This is where the wealthy think differently from the average person. They understand that being good at something is not the same as being seen as valuable. Sun Tzu never suggested winning through brute force when positioning could win the battle before it began. Managing how you are perceived, your availability, your options, your calm, is not dishonesty. It's controlling the terrain of perception itself. But perception only carries you so far alone. Even the most perfectly positioned general still needs allies strong enough to hold the ground once it's won. Sun Tzu's next principle exposes why some people rise quickly while others, equally talented, remain quietly held back by the company they keep. Sun Tzu warned that no general wins a war with a poorly chosen army, no matter how brilliant his strategy. In wealth, the equivalent army is the circle of people someone surrounds themselves with, and most people assemble this circle by accident, through proximity and habit, rather than through deliberate strategic choice. Picture someone with genuine talent and ambition, quietly building momentum toward a better financial future, only to be surrounded by relatives who see every success as an invitation to ask for a loan, friends who mock ambition as arrogance, and a partner who resents any time spent building skills instead of socializing. None of these people may be malicious. But collectively, they function as a drain, quietly taxing the very energy and resources needed to advance. A general does not blame his enemy for exploiting a weak army, he takes responsibility for choosing that army in the first place. Contrast this with stories of entrepreneurs who deliberately restructured their inner circle during pivotal growth periods, distancing themselves from relationships that consistently discouraged risk or demanded financial rescue, and instead seeking mentors and peers already operating at the level they aspired to reach. This wasn't cruelty. It was strategic army selection. Naval Ravikant has spoken about how proximity to specific kinds of thinking shapes outcomes more than raw effort does, that the people surrounding you either compound your progress or quietly erode it. This is where the deeper problem hides. Financially draining relationships rarely announce themselves as threats. They appear as loyalty, as family obligation, as friendship, making them far more difficult to identify and even harder to cut. Yet Sun Tzu never confused sentiment with strategy. An army that weakens the general must eventually be restructured, regardless of how the soldiers feel about it. But even a well-chosen army accomplishes nothing if its strength is spent as quickly as it's gathered. Sun Tzu's final principle before the conclusion reveals how the truly dangerous accumulate power silently, until the moment they no longer need permission from anyone. Sun Tzu taught that the skilled strategist accumulates strength quietly, so that by the time his opponent recognizes the threat, resistance is already futile. Applied to wealth, this is the principle of building multiple income streams and reinvesting relentlessly, not for show, but until a single point of dependency no longer holds any power over you. Most people rely on one employer, one paycheck, one source of approval for their entire financial existence. This single point of dependency is precisely what keeps them harmless. A boss who knows you have no alternative income knows exactly how much disrespect, stagnation, or underpayment you'll tolerate. But someone quietly building a second income stream, then a third, isn't just diversifying money, they're dismantling the leverage anyone else holds over them. Andrew Carnegie didn't build his fortune through a single triumphant deal. He reinvested profits from one venture into acquiring the next, layer by layer, until the compounding structure itself became unstoppable, competitors reacting to a size and momentum that had already been building long before they noticed it. Jeff Bezos operated similarly in Amazon's early years, reinvesting nearly everything back into the business while outside observers questioned why the company barely showed profit, because they were watching the wrong number. The real number was optionality, quietly compounding out of view. This is the deepest form of financial danger, not aggression, but accumulated optionality. The moment you no longer need your employer, your clients, or any single institution to survive, every negotiation changes. You stop asking. You start choosing. Sun Tzu never described power as loud. He described it as inevitable, built so gradually that its opponents only recognize it once resistance has become pointless. This is the final shift, from reacting to circumstances to quietly engineering them, one silent stream of leverage at a time. Becoming financially dangerous was never about aggression, and it was never about greed. It was about refusing to remain predictable in a world that profits from your predictability. Every principle in this video points toward the same quiet transformation, from a person who reacts to circumstances, to a strategist who has already positioned himself before the battle even begins. Sun Tzu never promised an easy path. He promised that the prepared mind defeats the unprepared army almost every time, not through luck, but through the patient accumulation of advantage most people are too impatient, too visible, or too poorly positioned to build. The financially harmless spend their lives fighting loud, obvious battles, for raises, for approval, for recognition, while the financially dangerous spend that same time building silent leverage nobody sees coming until it's too late to stop. You do not need more hours in the day. You do not need permission from an employer, a bank, or a system designed to keep you compliant. You need to stop broadcasting your ambition and start engineering your position, reading the terrain correctly, choosing your allies deliberately, waiting when waiting serves you, and accumulating strength long before anyone else realizes a war was ever being fought. The difference between the harmless and the dangerous was never talent. It was strategy applied with patience, silence, and discipline over time. So ask yourself honestly, are you still fighting visible battles the system already expects you to lose? Or are you ready to become the kind of person whose next move can no longer be predicted? If this video shifted how you see wealth and power, subscribe, because the next lesson goes even deeper into the strategies the wealthy use while everyone else stays exactly where they are.